My name's Brett Daise. I graduated from Georgia College in 2022, so 2 years ago. Actually, this May, so it'd be 2 years ago in May. So I graduated with a political science degree. I've been in the workforce now, obviously, for almost 2 years, but I've been working in politics and political science since I was probably 17 years old. History for a long time, but I started working out of college with a private company called Pacematic. They were a software developing company. I was part of their government relations team. Stayed there for about a year and 5 months, or something like that, and then decided I wanted to do something different. Come back to the state. I traveled a lot over there, so now I am with the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. So it's a state agency here in the state of Georgia. Provides low interest loans for municipalities for wastewater, sewage, drinking water. So we have a lot of federal programs as well as some state programs. So I'm our external affairs specialist over there. Interesting time, obviously. Legislative session just wrapped up, so it's been incredibly fascinating. I've been a part of multiple legislative sessions in multiple different states. This is my first full one in Georgia. I was an intern for the lieutenant governor's office, so I got to see a little bit of it there. But yeah, that's where we're at now, obviously. So I guess I'll talk about my time at GCSU. So I really enjoyed GCSU. I had a blast. That's why I enjoy doing things like this. I always like to kind of give back and give any advice that I can to, the political science folks that are kind of in the shoes that I was in, 3, 4 years ago, 2 years ago. But the biggest thing that I'll say is, the political science program is great. A lot of people major in political science not knowing what they want to do with it. But I can tell you, you have a vast range of options. The biggest being obviously you can do something like I do, which is government affairs. I'm technically, like a lobbyist essentially. I know that's kind of a nasty word. Nobody likes to use that word, but it's just one of the words that when you're in this industry, you have to get used to saying it, doing it. And it's a great job, obviously. So, that's one route you could take. You do the campaign route. I've also done a lot of that as well. I've worked on 2 statewide races. So, Georgia College gives you an interesting opportunity because they do have like things like GC and DC and, other programs that you can get involved with. So, biggest thing, unfortunately, I applied for the GC and DC program the year that COVID hit, and it kind of just disappeared. So it's unfortunate.
There was no Zoom equivalent.
No, not at that. It's funny. I submitted my application, I think it was like 3 weeks before COVID like shut everything down. And I was like, well, that's done. But it's the way it goes. My time at GCSU was great. I really enjoyed it. I try. My brother's there now. Actually,
Oh, that's right.
he's a business major, but I don't give him too much of a hard time for that. But I try to come back when I can. And like I said, if there was actually a few weeks ago at the Capitol, it was during the session, they had Georgia College Day at the Capitol. So I got to go and see President Cox and some of the folks there from SGA and everything else. So that was a really cool experience, obviously, to see some folks from there. Favorite courses or instructors from my time at GCSU. So I actually never had you as a professor. And in fact, I don't remember when you came in. Were you here when did you come in?
We met when I had you speak to my
That's right.
God, what's that like final class you take as you're about
Hmm.
to graduate?
I remember
Whatever
that.
that
That
was.
was last year. Yep. I
Yes.
remember that.
Yeah, so
Um,
we missed each other by one semester.
okay, cool. That's what I thought. I knew I didn't think you were there when I was there. So I can't speak to your classes, obviously, but I'm sure they're great. I think what you're doing is great too, having alumni come back and
You're
speak.
too kind.
I think it's very important. But obviously I gotta go with two professors who really resonated with me. It was Cliff Wilkinson, obviously. I know
Oh,
probably
yes.
a few folks say that. In fact, I'll tell a story about Professor Wilkinson.
He'll
He
love that
used
for sure.
he used to harp on us about going to GCCMA, which was Georgia County Managers Association. It was a big conference they hosted every year. I never had time to go, but I always thought it was cool that he, gave that opportunity to students. And then obviously he does the internships and everything like that. Um, but it's funny, this past 2 months ago, I actually had to register someone to go to
Oh,
GCCMA,
wow.
and I will be going
Small
next year.
world.
So it's just funny the way things come around. And had Professor Wilkinson not mentioned that, I wouldn't have any clue what it was or any background on it. So I was pretty well equipped to give a briefing to the staffer that we did have go for us. I was unable to go because I was actively in the legislative session. So, but it's cool, and that's just a great experience. And obviously he's got a lot of advice. The other professor that I'll say is the department head, Scott Buchanan.
Oh, yes,
Um,
amazing.
he came in when I was a junior and did phenomenal work, just with the program as well as with the classes that he taught. He taught Southern politics,
Yes.
and I will tell any student at Georgia College who wants to get involved in politics, especially in the South, you have to take that class. It is fascinating and it's so good, and it's equipped me for, you know, just everything that I do when it comes to Southern politics. And coincidentally, that next year after I took it, was the 2020 election, which I actually worked that cycle and got to see all the fun things that happened during that cycle. So um, it's funny. I always tell people, yeah, I worked in a part of history now, which is
Yeah.
good or bad, good or bad. It's not, but you know,
Interesting times.
exactly. And Professor Buchanan's class kind of equipped me for that. And we read a book. And I forget the name. I still have it actually. I lent it to someone last week, but um, it's a great book. It's written by Charles Bullock from
Oh, yes.
UGA, and we got to
That's my
meet
old
him.
boss.
Okay, there you go. And by the way, I'll give a plug for Dr. Bullock. Obviously, he's a phenomenal political
Mhm.
science professor as well. So any chance that he can come and talk to Georgia College students, I applaud that as well. Um, but those two professors at Georgia College are phenomenal. They stack up against the best anywhere, in my opinion. So, those are two things that I would recommend. And obviously take any classes you can of theirs, as well as your classes, because like I said, I think what you're doing here is phenomenal. It's important to hear from folks who have careers in political science and politics,
Definitely.
just because there's a lot of uncertainty when you take this major. You're not really sure what you want to do.
Yeah, because
Um,
if you don't want to work in like politics proper, it's kind of amorphous what you do with this degree.
Correct, 100%. And then from there, it's like, do I want to go get a master's degree? A lot of kids do it, and they go and get a law degree, which is great. Like that's a great way to introduce yourself. The other thing that I'd recommend is go get a political science degree, work in the industry in a little bit, and then if you like the law, go get a law degree.
Exactly.
Just that's from my experience. And then obviously, I've kind of told you a little bit about my career, but I'll give you some background on some of the cool stuff that I've got to experience. Working for a private company, I know I talked to your class last year a lot about it.
Yes, that was
Um,
fascinating.
it was very interesting, and leaving it now, I wanted something a little slower paced. That was the most fast paced job I've ever done in my life, and I've worked on 2 statewide races. It was insane. You were jumping from state to state lobbying for you know the same issue, but just different like environments and different
Mhm.
personalities. Like every state legislature has their own personality. You've got Kentucky where they're ultra conservative, and half of their legislature is made up of pastors. I mean, it's insane. And then you have Pennsylvania, which is such a unique legislature because they're a full-time legislature. A lot of people don't know that. But it's like DC, the lobbyists there, Pennsylvania, which I hope I never have to go back to the city, but it's it is DC. It's a little DC that a lot of people don't know about. So I got to experience that, and then Virginia and other states like that. I was interacting with really interesting individuals, obviously on both sides of the aisle too. That's the great thing about lobbying is you can't just,
Yeah,
especially in some of those other states. Virginia is a split legislature with a Republican governor. You can't just rely on one party to get things done. So I did a
Kentucky's
little
the
bit of
reverse.
that. What's that?
And Kentucky's the reverse.
Kentucky's the complete reverse. But I will tell you, they have such an interesting makeup because they have this Liberty Caucus there that's like
Oh, that's right.
it's like your Marjorie Taylor Greens in, a small state legislature. And man, is it's just it's something. They're a unique legislature to say the least. And they have a Democrat governor, which is the one thing that's fascinating. So got to do that. And now I'm kind of focused on a smaller scale. This is more public service, honestly, than anything, because what we're doing at GFA is we're essentially giving loans from federally funded programs. So it's the state resource funds. So Clean Water Resource Fund, Drinking Water Resource Fund, which basically just, right now they've got the lead service line funds coming down through bill, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we get a lot of those funds, and we go in and we provide low interest loans for communities to actually redo their water lines, or if they want to build a waste treatment plant. Milledgeville, for example, and this is another tidbit from Professor Wilkinson's class. He used to always talk about the water treatment plant in Milledgeville,
Oh,
and how it was, there was a lot of, things that kind of had, back and forth with it. And it was never Milledgeville. And I always laugh because Milledgeville you always get those water alerts on your phone, like, oh, there's a water main break or whatever. So GFA is designed to help fix a lot of that infrastructure. We do have state funds as well. And, I'll kind of plug this, but the governor just awarded us $250 million for our Georgia fund, which is our state funded kind of resource fund that we have. So we're excited about that because we're able to lend more funds to municipalities to, the Georgia fund's unique because you can do it for economic development. So for example, we gave, I think $33 million to Bryan County, which is, it's where Savannah it's where that Hyundai plant's going up. It's the largest project in Georgia's history. So we get to be a part of that, and we're excited for that, obviously. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now, and it's exciting to be in Georgia politics. Georgia politics is the most fun politics, in my opinion. But
dynamic.
correct. You've got to, and we're a gridlock legislature. Obviously, you have a Republican governor, Republican lieutenant governor, and then Republican all statewide electeds, plus two Republican, legislatures. So it's, you pretty much know what's going to happen. But there's always some drama that happens or something that goes on with the state, and so it's just interesting to watch, and it's a
And
fast.
it's not super majority anymore, so
No,
drives are strategic. They get some buy-in.
correct, and there's a lot of interesting personalities in Georgia politics, and like I said, I worked on two U.S. Senate races and was a part of two kind of large, high profile races, and even there at the federal level, there's just some interesting personalities. But it's been really cool, and I'm glad to have the experience that I do. And then, obviously the last thing is, do I have any advice for current students? Biggest thing that I could say is just get involved anywhere you can. Not even just with political science. Obviously, political science, anywhere you can get involved with the political science department is crucial. Obviously, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, join, whichever, there's college Republicans, there's young Dems on campus, join either one of those. I was a part of one, and I even competed in the debates for the programs. We would coordinate with the other parties and get them together. So I loved doing that. It was really fun. Everybody had a good time, and it never got like contentious. It was really, just a good time. And then with that, I would also say get involved elsewhere. I was in a fraternity, obviously, so that was something that was fun, and I got to be a part of leadership on that, and that gives you leadership skills and people skills going forward, especially if you want to be a lobbyist or work in campaigns. It's a great resource to have. And then the other thing that I'll say is, any leadership experience that you can gain on campus is crucial. I was in SGA for one semester. I was a student ambassador. I did a bunch of random things. So that's just the biggest thing that I'll say is just make sure you're involved, make sure you're always working, and make sure you're busy. I never like to be bored. I always tell my boss, I said, he's like, I know this is a lot of work. And it's like, I'd rather be busy than bored.
Exactly.
Those are great words to live by. And, the other thing I'll say is never have the words, that's not my job, come out of your mouth. Um, I've done a lot of interesting things with the opportunities that I've had, and a lot of them have not been very fun. But I somebody told me that, an old mentor of mine in my previous job, never have those words come out of your mouth. So no matter how stupid you think it is, what you're doing, don't say it's not my job, and don't not do it, because you can impress somebody just by doing the smallest things.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean that's really it.
Okay.
I,
Let's
I
let's back up just a little bit.
yeah,
So I
absolutely.
don't know how Dr. Buchanan teaches it, but I always kind of refer the lieutenant governor's office a little bit of a punching bag, so they've lost a lot of power. So how about you just explain to people what do you do when you work in the lieutenant governor's office? Like what do they actually do?
It's it's fascinating. So the other thing that I'll say is each lieutenant governor can mold how he wants to be in that role. I was there when Jeff Duncan was lieutenant governor. So obviously, if you're anywhere inclined to what's going on in Georgia politics, he kind of got the brunt of what happened with the whole Trump thing. But he led he every lieutenant governor has policy points that he wants to lead with in the legislature. So that's you're the president of the Senate, so you lead the Senate every single day. So during session, your role is crucial.
Mhm.
You're the floor leader. You're up there guiding the Senate. You have to maintain decorum, and you have to work with both sides of the aisle. The one thing that I'll applaud, Lieutenant Governor Jones on is, the minority party there, they do like him. As much as he's in the headlines for this or
Interesting.
that, they enjoy him and they have a good time. The minority leader actually retired this year, and I mean, she was up there at the pulpit giving him hugs, and
Oh, that's
yeah, it's
encouraging
great.
bipartisanship.
Yeah, 100%. And the Senate, the Senate's always this year especially, there's a high intensity amount of personalities there. And the lieutenant governor kind of needs to be the one in the legislative fashion of his job to kind of calm those personalities and be the leader of the Senate. And then along with that, constituent services is huge. I did a ton with constituent services. That's pretty much all I did in lieutenant governor's office. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
how about you be a little specific with that? Because when I talk to students about constituency service, they're always just blown away that you mean a politician can actually help me? They just
Yeah.
think about it. They just
So the one I will give you a great story, and I don't know if this is the current case for what's going on, but the biggest thing that I'll say is we we had and like I said, I don't know if this is still the case, but the complaint line for DFAX was actually routed to the lieutenant governor's
hmm.
front desk phone. And I just happened to be the one who sat in the front desk. So I had that phone. So we would get calls all day, every day from DFAX. And it was from, folks trying to get their food stamps, folks trying to get, you know, child services care, oh, they took my baby, whatever the case may be. Um, so it was really upsetting, and people would call you crying essentially. And I always enjoyed helping those folks out, because some of them were, you could tell, the ones who were kind of like, okay, this is, why would you do this, or why are you calling? But then there were some who genuinely needed the help, and you know routing them to the right person, and talking them through things and helping them out and kind of learning what their situation was. They'd call back like 2 days later. They'd be like, yeah, you saved my kid's life, or you made it to where I can eat this weekend, or whatever the case may be. So that was something I was always proud to do.
Yes, that's pretty life-changing work, and
Oh,
you're just in college and have your degree.
and the wonderful thing about that is, and this was, the constituent services director in the lieutenant governor's office at the time, he knew that that wasn't technically in the lieutenant governor's, like,
Yeah,
like if
your
you go and
wheelhouse.
check the code section, that's not in his role. But the lieutenant governor Jeff, and his the constituent services director, they had come to an agreement that we're just going to take these. We're going to do this because we're an elected official. We're here for a purpose. Um, let's make sure we get this done. And that's the thing that I'll say. Look, there are bad politicians and there are good politicians, but the staff and how that politician molds his staff to be is the most crucial part of any politician's role. If you're if you're a good person and you make sure that your staff follows good guidelines, then you're going to have a good office. You're going to have a successful career as a politician. And then, obviously vice versa. If you hire the wrong people and don't lead, from the front, then you're probably not going to have a very good office. But that was one way that I really enjoyed the lieutenant governor's office and saw firsthand how constituent services worked. And it was very impactful, honestly. Um, but yeah, that was the biggest thing. And if you have any more questions, like I blocked off a ton of
Okay, I
time. So
appreciate it. Just like one or two more. So
yeah, of course.
just talk a little bit more about lobbying. So your current job's a little bit more public advocacy.
Sure.
But just talk a little bit more about, lobbying as we tend to think of it.
Yeah.
I always try to emphasize to my students, there's tons of scandals, there's crumminess, but it's a necessary job. So how we
Right.
just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And look, every industry, whether you like it or not, has a lobbyist. And actually, I got that quote from a former alumni who spoke at the alumni event at GC Day at the Capitol. And he was a lobbyist, and I'm blanking on his name, and that's terrible. But he said that, and he's absolutely correct. He's 110% correct. Every industry has a lobbyist, whether it's the gun lobby, whether it's the healthcare lobby. They all have lobbyists, and it's an effective way to legislate. Now, certain states do it in a fashion that's probably not the greatest, but there are other states that are a lot more strict. For example, Georgia is extremely strict.
Yeah.
You have to file reports every 6 months, which I think it's actually, they just changed. I think it's more than that. As a state agency, since I don't have to register as a lobbyist, just because not right now. I was a registered lobbyist in other states before, but as a state, I work for the state. So any interaction I have with an elected official is technically state business, or, I'm doing the work of the agency. And we really don't lobby or advocate on behalf of ourselves. If we have to lobby or something, it's because we've gotten direction from, the governor's office
Yes.
or somebody else. We directly report to them. But lobbyists are an essential role. And, there are some lobby groups who, they're your stereotypical lobbyists. I will say, I've interacted with lobbyists in different states where they've walked into a meeting and they're wearing a flashy pinstripe suit with a really creative tie, and they say their name and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is a lobbyist. Like, he's your true contract lobbyist. And then there's lobbyists who are just normal, like everyday guys who show up wearing a Von Mars suit and, a cheap tie, and they work for, I don't know, just, American Forestry Association or something like that. And it's like, oh yeah, we got to get these regs cut, and we don't want all this, on the timber industry, whatever the case may be. It's a crucial part to legislation because you have to educate the legislators on what's going on. Because if you don't, they're going to vote on what they have in their mind. And contrary to popular belief, legislators don't know everything.
Yeah, no, they're mostly ex-lawyers and small businessmen. So there's just lots of stuff that's not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, and it varies by state. So we do have a lot of attorneys in the Georgia state legislature, but like I said, Kentucky's got a lot of pastors.
Yes, that's good.
Pennsylvania had a lot of union guys, right? It's a big union state. So you see a lot of that. Virginia was a mix. You saw a lot of different backgrounds in Virginia, which was really unique. And then the very small interaction that I had with the Wyoming legislature, that was fascinating. Those guys were just like, it was like a mosh posh.
Wow.
But they were cool, and it was cool to see their backgrounds. But I think it's good when you have a varied amount of backgrounds. Obviously, attorneys, they're usually the sharpest guys in there. They know the law, whatever the case may be. But I really like talking to legislators who are farmers.
Yeah.
I did like talking to the pastors too. They bring a different perspective to the legislature, whether you like it or not. Now, how they're going to vote. So, if it's a gambling bill, that's a no vote.
So that's pretty tough sell.
100%. And that going into it too. But lobbying is all
I guess
about
your pitch is don't oppose it too much.
well, and it was yeah, that or some legislatures is like, hey, can you take a walk on this vote? Like, just do a lap around the Capitol. But lobbying is all about relationships and how you interact with people. And that's the biggest thing that I would tell GCSU students is go out and put your name out there and start talking. You're going to talk probably a lot of crap at first, but you'll get there one way or another. I still talk crap, so it is what it is.
So is there anything we didn't talk about that we should? Any final words of advice for any students?
I would just say get involved. If you feel
Yeah.
passionate about an issue, or if you feel passionate about a candidate, jump on board, reach out to them, see if you can help out in any way, shape, or form. And then to the law guys who want to get involved in the law, I'll give you a great example. I'm not really, every so often I'll be like, maybe I should get my law degree. But what I would say is if you're a political science major who's thinking about going to law school, I would tell you to hold off on going to law school. I would tell you to go and work in a legislative capacity or a political capacity, government relations, whatever the case may be, and talk to the attorneys in that office. So, for example, I talked every day with our attorney in my old office, and it was fascinating. And I learned so much more about the law that I would never have known in any other capacity. And I had to interact sometimes with that, not me, like, being an attorney, but just learning about what's going on with certain things in certain states and whatever else. So that's my advice is, get involved, put yourself out there and, talk to your elected officials, call your state representatives too, call your state senator, call your state representatives, introduce yourself to them, get coffee with them and pick their brain because look, they have day jobs. Being a state legislator in Georgia is their part-time job. They will probably go and meet with you. They will talk. I
Yeah,
saw my state rep literally 2 weeks ago hosting an event, and I walked right up to her, and I've met her before, but just in that moment, I went and had that conversation.
yeah, Georgia's unique because the legislature's so big. You have relatively small districts, so you're pretty accessible for the most part.
100%, 100%. And they're normal people. They're not. They're
Absolutely.
not. They don't act the ones that I've met, and there's every state's different,
Outliers. Yeah.
every person's different, but the ones that I've met are very accessible, humble folks that they're politicians. They want to earn your vote one way or the other. So
Absolutely.
good deal.
Okay, that's very well said. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I always enjoy doing this.